The Midwest in American history. Long before the Europeans ever came to that area of this country, we have, of course, the Native Americans, generally regarded as the Plains Indians, living in that midsection of what became the United States. We see with the Plains Indians, in comparison to Indians that settled elsewhere in the American continents, North and South America, the ability to adapt to the climate and to the lay of the land. If in the northeast you have woodlands, in fact the whole eastern seaboard of this country, and the Indians adapting to that, or moving down into South America in jungle habitats, or elsewhere mountainous habitats, adapting to the climate and the lay of the land. For the Plains Indians, we're talking about the midsection of what becomes the United States. We're talking about an area of the country that was relatively flat, generally without trees, and with a hard sod that I will talk more about a bit later. And adapting to that situation. For the Plains Indians, the crucial factor of their daily life was the buffalo. And I read once a description of what was used by the Indians of the buffalo, and every imaginable part of that animal, from the skin to the innards to the horns, every part of it was used for some aspect of their daily life, and of course, most importantly, as a food for their diet. That Midwestern part of this country, inhabited by the Plains Indians, was called by the white settlers when they came to this country, and they learned more and more about what we now call the Midwest, beyond the Mississippi, as the Great Desert, American Desert. It was seen by those white settlers from Europe as a place where nothing could grow, where life couldn't sustain itself. Even though we know much better now, in terms of those Plains Indians who had in fact survived in those situations. The pushing of many eastern Indian tribes into what was called the Great Desert was a sense of it being their doom. In other words, we're pushing you out of the lands that we want in the fertile East into that area that we call a desert. And we expect you to succumb. They didn't, although the change for the Indians coming from the East to the Midwest would of course be a great change in their lives. In fact, we have European settlement before the English colonists moving across the Appalachians into the old Midwest. I'm referring to the French in the Mississippi Valley region. Various settlements, various forts, and a relationship, positive or negative as the case might be, between the French settlers and the Indians in that part of the Mississippi River Valley. Eventually there'd be struggles between the French and the English, and the French being driven out of those settlements in years to come. As far as the American settlers were concerned, the attraction always was land, coming from Europe, where land was relatively scarce in terms of land ownership, and we're talking, of course, about most of the population being farmers of one kind or another. The idea of the frontier, which we generally associate in our minds with the Wild West, all the term frontier means at any given time in a country's history is the limits of settlement of the dominant power of the area. And so for the colonists, that might be just X amount of miles west of where they started out. Eventually, we will see that push across the Appalachians being a dividing line in terms of the East and the Midwest. With the settlement after the American Revolutionary War, a very...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?